Incoming transmission. Initiating data compilation protocol. Compilation complete. Enhancing. Initializing data playback. Code Alpha. Begin playback.
Good morning, or whenever, and welcome to the Big Giant Head Podcast, number 3 for April 22nd, 2016, the rickety platform where I talk about my experiences developing the action platformer video game Savage, the Shard of Gosen, and all the junk related to and surrounding it, and then some. I will probably be swearing and cursing a lot, such as my way. If that doesn't sound fun, then turn back now. So, yeah, no podcast last week. For that, I apologize. Yeah, man, I just kind of threw in the towel. I guess this is the life updates / airing of the grievances segment. And yeah, man, like, the allergies have been coming down over here like a freaking hammer made out of pollen from the sky. It's been looking like a pollen apocalypse outside. It's really weird. Just it's this area has so much freaking flora, lots of different stuff. And I know you're probably tired of hearing me bitch about it, but that's the way this goes, I guess. And outside of developing the game, I'm pretty boring. So what the hell else am I going to talk about, right? But yeah, man, like, I was doing some reading and stuff about how your body releases chemicals and shit that it does during an allergic reaction that it does when you have like the flu or the cold or something. That made total sense, where it affects you in such a way where it's like hard to sleep and you just feel like a freaking zombie all the time. I was like, yeah, that's how it's going. So I just was like, you know what? I'm going to throw in the towel. It was like right around Tuesday or Wednesday, which happened to coincide with Dark Souls 3 release, which I swear had nothing to do with my absence. But yeah, man, if I had the strength to throw in the towel, I would have. But I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna take the rest of the week and sit and like maybe fiddle around with some work and stuff, do some writing. There's still a ton of writing that needs to be done, like as far as like story wise and stuff, and that was a little easier on the brain and good for the imagination muscles that haven't really been getting exercised a whole lot lately. It's mostly been like just engineering brain and logic brain have been taking the helm for a long time now, and I think it's starting to burn out a little bit. So it's nice to be able to switch gears to something that's like like something else. And I'll talk about that later, I guess. But for now, yeah, allergies have been a pain in the ass. But what else is new? Which, yeah, like, I guess that's part of the catch of doing a little podcast like this by yourself, is you don't have another person who's, you know, healthy and hale and hearty and can carry the show themselves, while the other guy just kind of like responds to stuff in the background between puffs of his inhaler and blowing his nose and shit, which is what I would be doing. So yeah, I didn't want to do a whole podcast of me just sitting there like getting frustrated and irritated, and then, you know, having to mute the mic every couple seconds, blowing my nose and stuff like that. That wouldn't have been... Who knows? Maybe that would have been kind of entertaining. Maybe I should just fucking bite the bullet and stop whining like a little baby and just do it. Next time I don't feel like it. But yeah, it had been affecting my energy levels all across the board. Like, could not work up the energy to go down to the gym or exercise or anything. Since, though, it's cleared up a lot, which is nice. We've been getting a lot of rain, and it's been scrubbing the air around here and making it nicer and cleaner. And I can immediately feel a difference after we had our last big rainstorm. It felt like some big invisible vacuum cleaner had just sucked up all this miasma out of the air, and I could breathe, which was nice. So I've been going back to the gym, feeling a lot better. The rain has kind of stopped, so it's like the rain that we had has been helping everything grow and bloom again. So the allergies are kind of starting to come back, but I am digging my heels, and I am determined to beat this thing and not let it affect me as profoundly as it has been, because it's just annoying, man. So bring it on, stupid pollinator. I am ready for you. But yeah, excuses. Wham wham baby time. But while I haven't been able to make it to the gym or anything, I have been using a foam roller that a friend of ours left over here, and my wife Bo, such as her expertise lends to this, she knows all the ins and outs of working with a foam roller and stuff, and physical therapy stuff like that. Since she's like freaking thrice certified or whatever, she's like the highest level that you can be as a physical fitness personal trainer, and what's the word? God damn it! What's the You see, this is why I need another person here to be like, that's the word you're looking for, Matthew. I'd be like, thanks, buddy. That's why we make such a good team, you and I. But yeah, physical therapy, when you get injured or whatever, or something doesn't work right, she can kind of help it along. Rehabilitation. There we go. Thanks, other Matt. No problem, other Matt. But I've been using that, and it's been feeling amazing. Between that and the little back support thing that I have on my chair, a lot of my back and leg problems have just been kind of going away completely, which is super nice. So that stuff on top of the allergies clearing up a little bit like they did was just like, oh yeah, I feel like I can take on the entire empire myself. Only that guy didn't come back. Hopefully I'm here to stick around for a little while. But yeah, the foam roller is amazing. It felt really weird at first. It felt painful and strange, and my wife's like, it's supposed to. That means it's working. Wherever hurts the most, that's where you need to roll your body across it. So I mean, if anybody's not familiar, it's this giant cylindrical piece of foam that you lay on the ground, and you kind of use your weight to kind of massage out or rub out through pure force sections of your body that are giving you trouble, because sometimes it's just like muscle knots and what's it called, like myofascial pain and stuff like that, where it's like toxin buildup, or your things around your nerves and muscles are acting all funny. You just kind of roll it out, and it's helped me a lot. I get a lot of sciatic pain in my left leg, and apparently rolling your left ass cheek on top of one of those things for extended periods of time and really grinding it out really helps. So yeah, man, it feels good, especially since given what I'm supposed to be doing all the time is just sitting here working. That's been a kind of a really good utility there. That and using WorkRave. I think I talked about WorkRave last time. A little break management software. So I've been incorporating exercises into the WorkRave program that I have installed on my computer. So every 20 minutes, it tells me, hey, take a break for 60 seconds, and then every hour, take a break for 5 minutes. So I've been incorporating exercises into those little rest breaks, and I feel a lot better for it. Like I'll drop and do some push-ups or something, or do some crunches, or do some leg stretches, and kind of work those into a rotation every micro break and every 5-minute break. And it's been good, man. That with the foam rolling and everything else, starting to feel physically a lot better. And you kind of need that shit for your mind to function, So high marks all across the board. But as I said before, Dark Souls 3 came out last week, was it? On the 12th or the 11th? Officially on the 12th, but they released it globally in our time zone on the 11th. So the PC release came out the same exact moment for everyone around the world, which is kind of cool. Except for that the game was crashing all the time. I was having a lot of fun with it up until it started to crash. I'd been maybe playing like a couple hours until I started to hit these walls of crashes, and most of them seemed to happen right around the frickin' bonfire area. Speaking of which, we have transitioned segments into the what have you been playing? What kind of video games do you like to play when you're not working and stuff? But I've been talking so much about fucking Dark Souls lately that I have affectionately dubbed this segment Estes for the rest of us. So yeah, Dark Souls 3 is an appropriate game to talk about here. But yeah, man, the crashes are just a huge downer. I'd been really champing at the bit, which it is champing, by the way, not chomping. Go figure. But I'd just been squirming like crazy, waiting for this game to drop just so I could play it, because beforehand, I had been playing Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2, and the weekend before the launch, it was like Sunday night, I had finished up all the remaining Dark Souls 2 content, because I hadn't gone through the DLC stuff. And holy shit, is that stuff difficult. You can tell that I really mean it, because I leaned back in my chair, and all the creaking lets you know that it's serious. That's how you know. But oh my god, none of the enemies can be staggered unless you're wielding some huge, massive, crazy two-hander. The enemy placement is, I mean, overall the DLC is pretty neat. Like, as far as level design goes, it's a big step up from a lot of the stuff that's in the vanilla game. I played it kind of out of sequence, though. I had already beaten the boss, like the main boss of the game, Nashandra, I think she's called, the Dark Queen, before doing the DLC. And I guess if you're really doing it serious, like, you're supposed to do the DLC before you fight her, and that's kind of how you get the full narrative experience that the expansions are supposed to. That's how the expansions kind of tie into the vanilla game. But I had beaten the vanilla stuff first, and then with the same character, I went through the DLC stuff. Very challenging, very very frustrating. Just like all the rest of Dark Souls 2 kind of is. You can tell they really cranked up the values for the enemies too, because I mean, they figured like you'd have a pretty overpowered character by the time you got around to playing the DLC if you just if you used the same character that you used to beat the vanilla game with, which is kind of weird, because if you do kind of like logically play it through like how it's supposed to be played now, I feel like you're going to kind of hit a wall once you get to the DLC stuff, where it's like, I can't fucking do any damage to any of these guys. They don't stagger. They do tons of damage to me. They're very fast. But yeah, there's some very interesting ideas, just design-wise, that almost make up for the rest of the content of Dark Souls 2. I've come around to Dark Souls 2. I don't hate it like I did initially. I'm not as grouchy about it anymore, and I have a feeling I'd have a lot of fun going back to it at some later date, and doing another run through the game, and then maybe doing a challenge run or something, and seeing what New Game Plus is like, someday later after I forget about how frustrated I was with it, maybe. But yeah, I mean, as how it stacks up with, say Dark Souls, and now Dark Souls 3, it definitely pales in comparison, mostly in the visual storytelling, like the general design. There's not a lot of clutter that tells stories in the game, which is something I really liked about the first Dark Souls. And I did get a chance to play Demon Souls too. Here's kind of how this all comes back into Dark Souls 3. So Dark Souls 3 is just crashing like a motherfucker. Right around the bonfires, which are almost the most important part of the damn game, right? That's how you get everywhere. That's how you level up. That's how you refill your healing resources and all that stuff. So it's kind of frustrating that it seems like something to do with the way the bonfires light your character and the way it lights certain pieces of equipment that you're wearing around the bonfire that breaks the game. I noticed within like game units, I'd be like a couple meters away from the bonfire every time it crashed, either running up to it or being at a bonfire and trying to run away from it. Also, bonfires are how you teleport to all the other bonfires and stuff. Like once you get out of the Firelink Shrine area, which is your hub, in Dark Souls 3, it seems like you can pretty much access the rest of the game on foot. Like you can run everywhere else. Or there's some kind of means of transporting you to the next location. It all feels kind of linear, but certain areas do fold back on themselves and certain areas do branch and stuff like that. So it's like a little bit of Dark Souls and a little bit of Dark Souls 2 kind of mixed together. But yeah, teleportation is back, warping to bonfires is back and stuff like that. But the thing is, when you're in the Firelink Shrine area in the very beginning, the way that you start the game is by warping to the level 1 essentially. Like Firelink Shrine is sort of level 0. It's like the tutorial area and your hub zone, like the player town kind of thing, where you buy all your items and you level up and all that crap. If the game is crashing around bonfires, and that's kind of how you start your game. Like the game started crashing for me a little bit into the game, and it's weird that it hadn't been doing it up to this point. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it has something to do with like save game bloat or something, plus the lighting, plus the stuff you're wearing, plus the textures that are used on the equipment that you're wearing and how light reacts to it and the different texture types and stuff. Who knows what exactly it is? Maybe a combination of all that stuff. And it was just, but I could reproduce this issue 100%. So I had originally gone back to Firelink Shrine because that's what you do, and I wanted to kind of explore that sort of tutorial area a little bit because there's always like secrets to find and shit. So I went back, and since the bonfires were crashing me, crashing to desktop, I couldn't proceed with the game. Like I couldn't get out of Firelink Shrine and move on to the rest of the stuff, the rest of the content. So that was a huge bummer. I had been experimenting at one point too. I was like, I wonder what's causing this. Maybe I can figure it out. So I felt like I started fucking debugging Dark Souls like I would Savage or something. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna unequip my sword, unequip my shield, run back and forth to the bonfire, see if anything happens there. Crash. Okay. Reload the game. Okay, what can I do this time? I'm gonna take off my hat, I'm gonna take off my helmet, I'm gonna take off my gloves, run back to the bonfire and see what happens. Oh, crash to that stop again. All right. Maybe I'll mix and match some stuff. I eventually got it narrowed down to a piece of gear called the Cleric Trousers. And it was a relatively lightweight pants slot piece of gear that gave you a reasonable amount of defense for where I was in the game. And it was light enough so that I could still do like fast dodges and stuff. So like the more shit that you have on you, the heavier the gear is. So if you're like all decked out in knight armor, you get a little slower. I don't know if this is the case in Dark Souls 3. It's hard to tell. But in previous Dark Souls, like your overall speed was compromised. Like you would run slower and walk slower, and most importantly, your dodge would be kind of nerfed a little bit. Whereas if you weren't wearing anything, you could fucking dodge all over the place like a madman. Your dodges would be nice and long, and you'd have a lot of invincibility frames in your dodge and stuff. The less crazy armor you were wearing. So I narrowed it down to this piece of pants gear. Whenever I took it off, it didn't seem like the game would crash. So I was like, oh my god, it's the cleric trousers. I'm going to do my part and let everybody know. So I go on Steam into the main thread where everyone's complaining about their crashes and stuff. And I'm like, hey guys, don't wear the cleric trousers because that seems to be what's crashing my game. So see if you can just try to go commando. Only in Dark Souls would a decent pair of pants be your undoing. So it seemed to kind of work for like maybe half an hour past that, and then it just started crashing again. So I was like, okay, I can't really tell what's causing this. So yeah, it might be a combination of save game stuff or something, but it was a huge bummer because I really wanted to play it. I wanted to at least, dive into it for a day or so, like take a day off and just like experience the newness of Dark Souls. But what I did play was fucking awesome. This story has a better ending, or a happier ending, I should say. My friend Tim let me borrow his PlayStation 3, so I got to play Demon Souls, which I had never played before, all the way through. Once upon a time, another friend of mine let me borrow a PlayStation 3, and with it a copy of Demon Souls and like Uncharted and Valkyria Chronicles, I think were the three games that he let me borrow. And I played a little bit of Demon Souls. I made it up to the first boss, Phalanx, which is one of my favorite bosses, actually. I know he's like super easy and beginny and all that shit, but like he's so effective at teaching you how to play that game, which is why I love Phalanx. And there hasn't really been a better visual representation of how to play a Souls game, in my opinion, than that particular boss, because he's all armored up in front and he's got a soft, gushy back. Well, he's made up of a bunch of these slime monsters, and they all have shields and spears. And he's got a core to him. He's got this core that actually can't attack or defend itself, but he's surrounded with all these armored slimes. And they all kind of move together in a, like kind of a shield wall phalanx kind of formation. It's like the end of 300 when there's like 20 dudes left, and they all have their shields up and they're all covering themselves in kind of like a dome shape, and they've got their spears sticking out, so it looks like a shieldy pin-cushiony thing. Looks like a badass urchin, essentially. That's kind of what Phalanx is, except for instead of crazy jacked out Hollywood actor Spartan people behind the shields, it's black gooey slime guys. And that and those creatures are so effective at teaching how to play the game, because obviously there's a shield in front and you see the goopy stuff on the other side, so it looks squishy. It looks like something that if I hit it hard enough, like it'll probably hurt really bad. And that's kind of how you take him out, is you kind of just run around and wait for pieces of him to sort of break formation, and they'll sort of slime their way after you, and you kind of circle around and find their weak spot, and you conduct a well-placed strike. Bingo, dead slime. And you do that enough times until you expose the core, and then you get at the core, and voila, you win. But that was my first experience with Demon Souls, and it was an incredibly engaging one, because I had never played a game quite like it. Like, most of the 3D sort of hack and slash games encouraged you to like jam on a button, until something was dead, and do combos and all that stuff, and like get a combo meter going, and kind of like God of War or something. Or I think the only other kind of games I played that resembled a Souls game were maybe things like Oblivion, because I remember Oblivion had a stamina meter and stuff, but the combat wasn't nearly as engaging, in my opinion, as Demon Souls was. I remember over and over and over again in the first area on a bridge at the Boletaria Palace. I think that level's called the first castle area. There's a bunch of these shitty little undead dudes, essentially wearing washcloths and wielding spatulas, essentially. Just weakest, crunchiest, crappy junk in the game, and they'll leap at you and try to strike you. And I remember I was playing a character with a sword. I don't remember what class it was at this time. It was like 2010 or something, so it's kind of hazy. But I remember just respawning all the guys in the area again and again and again, just so I could perfect my sword swing during their leaping strike and get pixel perfect accuracy and stuff. And the way the combat in those games work is there's it seems like the more coverage that you get with your weapon during a collision with an enemy, the more damage output you do. So it just felt very satisfying, and it felt like it took speed into account too. Probably doesn't, but I seem to remember just sprinting and doing this sprinting slash attack, like feeling like a samurai, like charging another samurai in a field of wheat or something, and striking and then turning around and seeing the guy slump over and die, and it was just super satisfying. And no other game had quite nailed that kind of experience for me. So it was really cool to get Demon Souls last week to play around with, especially since Dark Souls 3 wasn't really available. Mostly, it was just kind of broken, and I guess it still is broken for a lot of people. If you go on the Steam forums, a lot of people complaining, but I guess that's kind of to be expected anymore from a From Software release published by Bandai Namco, I guess. Because I remember the Dark Souls PC release was kind of busted, and it wasn't until a modder released DS Fix that it solved a lot of issues with the PC port. So they're kind of known for releasing abysmal PC ports, and it's kind of janky for the first handful of months that it's out there on the market. But anyway, what was I saying? Demon Souls. So much fun. Such a freaking tight game. It was nice to actually see what the beginning of all this was. The Souls games. The genre definer, right? It's super cool. It's like getting to hear, a band's demo tape or something, or their first album that's just full of crazy ideas, and it's kind of raw and it's a little weird, but that makes it better somehow. So yeah, you can see a lot of the boss structure that later games had, like the Bed of Chaos, for example, where it's more of kind of a puzzle than it really is a melee or action-y kind of boss fight where you're trying to deal damage to something and dodge its attacks and stuff. Like in Demon Souls with the Dragon God, you're essentially just running to different nodes that will damage him. Like you got to run to one spot that has a big old crazy dragon slaying ballista, and you fire that off, and then you got to run across the map to the other side to fire the other one, and then he's kind of pinned down, and then you run over to his face and hit his nose a couple times, and he dies. But it's all about trying to read the environment and figure out what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go, which is kind of cool. I know a lot of people didn't like the Bed of Chaos, but I thought it was kind of neat. It was a little refreshing to try something like that. Thought the Dragon God was actually more interesting than the Bed of Chaos was in Dark Souls, but I digress. What is really interesting about Demon Souls, aside from the fact that it kind of spawned this whole new genre, what we call Souls-like now. I mean, maybe Dark Souls is more responsible for that, since that one had more opportunity for more people to play, because it was on several different consoles and systems and stuff. But anyway, it was just cool to see the start of it. And Demon Souls is such a tight little experience too. It's not very long. I played through that instead of playing Dark Souls 3, which I was pretty sore about, but I didn't care because Demon Souls was a lot of fun. It was very interesting to play it and to have a better experience with it than I did with Dark Souls 2, which just kind of confirmed for me that yeah, Dark Souls 2 was probably I don't want to call it the worst, but maybe the weakest link in the Souls chain. So yeah, I mean, it was cool to go back and see the beginning of all these different concepts and character types. It's like this genre already has like, you know, these character types that are sort of recycled. I mean, it's almost like a, you know, like a play structure or something. It's like, okay, you need the yurt character who's maybe gonna go around and murder everybody in your hub area if you let him. You need the crestfallen warrior guy. You need the blacksmith. You need the sage like information dealer type person who also like contributes to your character building, like the Maiden in Black or the Emerald Herald or well, I don't know who that would be in Dark Souls. Maybe Framped, Kingseeker Framped. So yeah, this is just really interesting to see the beginning of all this stuff and to get to play with it and actually have it be a reasonable experience. I don't know if it's because I had just, you know, come off of slogging my way through Dark Souls 2 and then previous to that Dark Souls, but Demon Souls was pretty easy for me. Most bosses I was able to take out either on the first try or the second try. There were only a couple that gave me a hard time beyond that. Like I think the last guy, the King Allant, I think his name is. He he gave me a headache until I decided to kind of just stand back and watch him for a while and read his attacks and stuff. He gave me a really hard time until I decided to be more patient with the game. But oh my god, so many good stages and bosses in general. The freaking Manta Ray boss is fucking awesome, where you have to find the sword within the boss fight called the Storm something. I can't remember what it's called, like Storm Lord sword or something like that. What it does is it creates this giant sort of air slice that's composed of like storm energy, and it blasts it off into the up into the sky. And what that does is it allows you to actually hit this giant manta ray boss that's in the sky. But the cool thing about that level is you're seeing all these giant flying manta rays throughout the area, and they will fire these giant needles from their stingers at you. So they're constantly harassing you through the whole game. The first time you see them, you're kind of awestruck because they're massive. But then you get to the end and actually fight the Storm King or whatever he's called, and you see him coming out of the, you know, parting the clouds and flying towards you on this gorgeous cliff face. And you're like, oh, it's another one of these manta ray guys. But then there's this awesome moment of scale where the camera pans around to the back of the thing, and you see the manta rays that have been bothering you the whole stage. And there's like 10 of them on his back. So he's just this massive, crazy monster. And I think you can kill him with arrows if you want to be super hardcore about it. But within that little area, there's a sword that's sticking out of the ground. And if you grab it, then you can fire off these crazy magical air projectiles at him. And it just makes for a really, really awesome moment in the game. And in a lot of ways, like I kind of like this better than any of the other Souls games that I've played so far. So, you know, 1, 2, and 3. And I have gone back to 3 since last week. And this Monday, they released a very small patch, and that seems to have fixed a lot of my crash issues. The game hasn't crashed since, so it will lock. Like the frames will completely lock up sometimes. Like it'll go to, you know, like freaking like 1 or 5 frames a second briefly. Usually if you're swinging the camera around. But it doesn't have an happen often. So the game is way more playable. So I have since been able to put some more time into it, and it's crazy, man. It's gorgeous. It feels, I mean, it feels better than 2. The combat is really dancey. Like it almost starts to creep into way more frantic hack and slash territory for me. Like almost like beat 'em up in some ways. It almost kind of encourages you to play way more aggressively than I have been previously used to in any of the Dark Souls games or Demon Souls now that I got that one under my belt. Hey. But the stage design is way better than 2 in general. Everything is so dense looking and packed, and the environments tell a much better story now. Like in Dark Souls 2, what really bothered me, it especially now feels that way when you go back to Dark Souls 2 and look at it versus Dark Souls 3. You way more notice all the repeating textures all over everything in Dark Souls 2 because everything looks so fucking empty. Like, you know, you look at the stone walls in a castle and you can kind of just see the art assets, you know, coming through instead of it looking like a castle, you know, looking like a place that people have lived in and people have been enslaved and tortured in and demons have taken over or whatever, and now you're hacking and slashing your way through and killing bad guys and monsters and dead things, and it's less of an experience and more of a, oh, hey, it's a video game. Dark Souls 3 kind of comes back around to the feeling I got from Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls, in that it feels like a much more believable place. It feels handcrafted. Oh my god, it's so crazy looking. Just looking at all the rock formations and stuff and a hillside and all the different assets in there and stuff. It's very inspiring. These are awesome games to be playing right now for what I'm doing with Savage. So yeah, Dark Souls 3, a lot more action-y feeling, but still great. I've taken out a handful of bosses now. And they're all amazing. The music is gorgeous, and the bosses are all multi-phase. So you know, you get a boss down to like half health or something, and something about him will change. He'll get more aggressive, and maybe he'll have like some kind of weird magical aura that will damage you or cause some kind of status effect. And he'll get faster. And with that happening, you can hear the music change along with the fight too, which is super. Just it makes you fucking crazy during a boss. It really gives you a shot in the arm of adrenaline, and you're just very few games can do this for me like Dark Souls can. It's almost like it produces a chemical reaction in my body that I am now getting addicted to. So maybe the Souls games should kind of be illegal in some countries. But yeah, man, having a lot of Souls fun. Let's see what else. Out of curiosity, I did go back and play the first Kingsfield game, which, if you don't know, is Miyazaki, the director of Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Demon Souls and all that. Those were his first games with From Software, I think, maybe. Or they were at least his first fantasy games with them, I guess. And you can totally see freaking Demon Souls and Dark Souls in Kingsfield. It's a first-person game. Everything is very slow and strange. Very ugly, because it came out in like 1995? 96? Something like that. But they're horribly ugly, but they are consistent in the way that they look. So it still creates this sort of, within itself, it creates a world that looks like you can actually live in. But because it looks so ugly and weird, it lends to this kind of nightmare quality that the game has, especially since everything's very slow and deliberate. Like, your movement is very slow. When you swing a weapon, it's very slow and deliberate, so you always have to be mindful of where you are in relation to an enemy, and you have to really hit the mark every time and make your swing count. and you have a little stamina meter that you have to be mindful of, and it's like you're committing certain points of stamina into your actions, so you kind of have to weigh the risk versus the positive outcome, which is dealing damage or killing an enemy or something like that. So there's a lot of back and forth like that. There's a lot of what would become the Demon Souls and Dark Souls sort of combat formula. So it's fascinating. It's totally fascinating to look at. For me, the game is still very easy for me to get into, but maybe I would see where other people would just be like, "No, this is stupid." So it's more for a curiosity or something than actually like sitting down and relaxing with a video game. But for me, from a design perspective, it's been a fascinating thing to look at, especially now having played like freaking 4 Souls games, to see like the first Kingsfield game and how everything's progressed up to Dark Souls 3. It's like, what? This is crazy. But anyway, man, that's what's been going on with me, life-wise and video game-wise. Up to my eyeballs in Dark Souls. It felt great to take a break, even though I felt like I was on my allergic deathbed. Very inspiring. Something that I've been taking to heart too is just the general world building of the Souls games and how they tell stories visually through their landscapes and through items that you pick up and everything, give you kind of clues to piece together what the deeper lore kind of looks like, without actually coming out and telling you and having some long drawn out awkward cutscene that you don't get to play through. Which I find a lot more preferable and appropriate for a video game, I guess, for that type of game anyway. Not that it's a bad thing to have narrative heavy, cutscene driven games, but for something like Dark Souls, where the actual gameplay is so engaging, it's really cool that they're able to weave the narrative and the lore almost directly into the gameplay. And for a 2D platformer game, that's something that something like Savage could definitely benefit from, is that style of storytelling. So I've been kind of thinking about how I'm delivering the story to the player. So here we go. There's a nice segue into development stuff. What's been going on with Savage? Well, recently I have been doing a lot of writing, because, as I said earlier, there's a lot of writing that still needs to get done. And also, I've been trying to figure out, work my way around how to deliver all of this new information to the player, what to hold back and what to reveal, and what to kind of allow for some room for speculation and stuff like that. Because Savage has kind of gotten pretty lore heavy underneath the main narrative that is Savage. Okay, so like the I wanted the motivation for Savage to be very easy to kind of push you through the game and give you a very clear goal. It's very standard sort of fantasy, dark fantasy fare, where like the main player's village is taken out by a big scary warlord man, and the family and friends are destroyed, and now it's time for revenge. Okay, there you go. That right there is really all you need to complete Savage, from a narrative standpoint. You just got to go after the guy that done you wrong, and that information is really all you are gonna need to get from point A to point B. The rest of it, though, there's more to it than that. A little bit more mechanically, because the game needs areas and levels to traverse, right? So, but the main thing is that the main villain is he's next in line to succeed the emperor for the Argeshi throne, and he's going to be the first one to do it in a very long time, who's not part of the current bloodline of Imperials, of emperors, and but he's positioned himself politically, religiously, and through military to be, really the only really next choice to be crowned the emperor. And there's like a council that decides these things and stuff. But to get to him, the main character is going to have to almost sort of follow the same path that he is. He's sort of collecting information and collecting these things. The bad guy now, whose name is Aben Bael, and he's going to be the next emperor of the Argeshi throne. And he is essentially attempting to resurrect God. And in the game's backstory and lore and history and stuff, God left the world and created this giant sort of global problem, and it's known as the Great Wound. And it happened during like a war of three nations, and it kind of happened at the epicenter of where all these nations sort of meet, and essentially destroyed a lot of the surrounding land that is Argosenia, which is where the seat of the Argeshi Empire was, and still kind of is officially, but the world is so reduced to such a crazy broken, state anymore. It's almost like it's like the beginning of a post-apocalyptic sort of age for the game world. And to resurrect God, or to figure out how to do it, or to figure out how to bring him back, or to figure out how to take God's place, he's got to kind of track down all of these ancient seals. Not seals like arr, 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 but like these tokens that the old guardian god gave to ancient chieftains to hang on to and everything. And from the Great Wound, I mean, there's a lot of like speculation about how this happened and if it is even happening. Like, a lot of people just think, humanity's fucked up and they're just being assholes. But a lot of people seem to be going kind of crazy, and things are just generally not in a good way. And the emperor is trying to fix this by enslaving everybody so that they can't go crazy, and put them to work finding the things that he needs to be found in order to resurrect God in some kind of fashion, whether it is that he sort of succeeds God, or harnesses his power, or actually literally resurrects him or calls him back. That's kind of how he's going about doing it. So the hero, the barbarian character that you play as, by default, his name is Kel. He kind of has to figure out what Aben Bael's sort of path looks like, so that he can kind of follow him and track him down, so he can kill him and get revenge. So you kind of find out more about the world and about these chieftains and stuff as you kind of hunt him down, and the player can kind of decide, the manner in which he confronts Bael, whether it's from the the countenance of a hero, or as a slayer and a conqueror, and you're just out for bloody revenge and all that stuff. This conveniently just so happens that you might inadvertently be winding up making things better for everyone else if you kill this guy. But the player can decide whether or not they care about that or not. But that's kind of, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on behind the scenes, and the different seals have been given to different peoples, and there's different sort of clans and societies in the game world, and there's gods conspiring against each other, and dark, weird creatures doing dark, weird things, and the Souls games have been a huge inspiration in my thought process on how to deliver this information to the player. Because I could go the heavy-handed route and just explain a bunch of shit in a bunch of text boxes while characters are expositioning at each other, right? Like, oh, did you know that there's an ancient sect of warriors that when they had their eyes cut out by an enemy, they would replace them with golden prosthetics? And if a warrior had 2 golden orbs for eyes, you knew he was a real badass. And if he could continue fighting that way, so much the better. And you don't want somebody to just come right out and say that in conversation, because it's like kind of silly. As an example, so I have been, as I'm writing all this out, I am coming up with slightly subtler ways to communicate the information to the player. And also, like, a lot of this shit, like, the player might not even care about, So it's kind of nice to have the option in there. It's like, all this stuff is in there if you want to dig for it. You don't have to dig too far or too hard. Maybe for some of it you kind of do, and maybe some of it is open to interpretation and speculation, but I mean, it's obviously always nice to commit to an idea, have a very hard sort of line or a concept that you're like, okay, this is what this is, but how do I communicate it in such a way that it doesn't necessarily have to mean that to, this collection of people playing the game. And there's nothing worse than when you're playing a game and you feel like it's time for exposition, and it's delivered so poorly and so heavy-handedly that you're just like, man, I don't even care. Like, that's why I wanted to have the game be carried by a very simple concept, which is just revenge, and it's a good motivator. A revenge story is, relatively easy to tell, and there's a clear target, that the person's trying to hunt down and kill. And in Kel's case, it's more the how that needs to be figured out. Like, he needs to figure out how to get to this guy and how to exact his bloody revenge. So yeah, that's part of what I've been doing. Last time I talked a lot about the Trot About character, the Mother of Bears boss, which she is going to be one of the chieftains that has one of these seals. That was given to her people by the guardian god before he left. And of course, all the people in possession of these seals are also susceptible to this miasma that's kind of tainting their minds a bit. Less so, though, this character, because she's part of the Ilgogi people, who are cannibals. And some people say that they've become cannibals to eat away the madness of humanity. So they're eating people so that the people don't go crazy. So there are some people that have this weird idea that's like, well, maybe they're kind of doing us a favor. There's a finality in digestion. So these people can't go crazy, and because a part of it is that makes them very hard to kill, and they're essentially like sentient zombie type, just madmen kind of thing. And you'll run into a lot of these sorts of guys, like bandits and brigands and outcasts, who have kind of gone crazy out in the wilderness, and then the Ilgogi just eats everybody. And that's in part how they from where they get their kind of unnatural strength and some of their darker abilities. And but anyway, Trot About is she was done last week, but I decided to go the extra mile and have her ride in on her bear mount. And he's a dire bear, and he's an avatar of Magdra. And what that means is Magdra is a bear god, and he's a consumer. He's like the god of eating, essentially. He's a man eater. He's a world eater. He's he consumes and then he excretes. And what he excretes are usually creations and weird things. And But anyway, depending on what he ate and the kind of day he was having and what kind of bowel movement he had, the thing that results from his excrement, from his shit, can be either something kind of fascinating or strange or good or evil or, cranky. The entities span a whole spectrum of personality disorders. But the bear familiar that she has is special in that he's called an avatar of Magdra, and he's created in such a way where he's a warrior that the Ilgogi did not eat and thought would be better to sacrifice to Magdra. So he's kind of consumed, but in a different way, and it involves the mother of bears, which is the Tra Tabout character. She kind of embodies the sort of warrior and cannibal nature of her people, and the bear, almost in a weird way, kind of becomes her spouse and offspring, sort of, and it's all sort of come about from a warrior that they did not choose to eat and instead sacrificed to Magdra, and in so doing they infuse him kind of with a part of Magdra's essence, and he becomes an avatar of Magdra, and he takes a new form in this kind of big, scary, unnatural-looking bear. And the bear that I was using, the animation set, was just kind of like a standard dire bear, and it was a dual boss fight. Like Tra Tabout was running around trying to hit you with her giant stone axe, and the bear would be there as well, making life miserable for you. But I wanted to kind of amp it up a little bit and make the bear a little different and more interesting and give it more character. So I redid him and gave him like scars and weapons are lodged in him from other warriors that tried to take him out and failed, most likely. And gave him armor and stuff and gave him a saddle so that Tra could ride in on him. So that's kind of phase 1 of the boss fight. Now, I also gave her a brace of throwing spears. Spears that normal people use two-handed, like standard like battle spears, but she just uses them one-handed and chucks them at you. So she's burly, she's crazy and strong and savage and appropriately so, but they start out as sort of one entity. Like she comes in riding on him, and they have like just a couple attacks together while she's mounted on him. And eventually, you knock her off, and then it turns into the double boss fight, and then they both kind of do their stuff, and one will get way more aggressive if you kill the other. And there are different ways you can do it, and it's a much more interesting and engaging fight now. There are only a couple more. There's like 2 or 3 more sprites that I have to do for the avatar of Magdra. His name's Mag. And but most of it is in there, most of it's in the game. But I've been toying with the idea of since before I had mentioned I needed more projectiles in the game. I don't feel like I have enough projectiles. And projectiles are great because they can form a pattern, and they can in their frequency and their trajectory. So it kind of aids in the platforming style of gameplay, the 2D platformer. Whereas most of it is trying to maneuver around hazards and watch for timing for things. So I need more stuff that shoots stuff, essentially more platformer friendly stuff. So I've been toying with the idea of giving her almost like black powder spears, where some of the spears that she throws will have a fuse on them, and when they hit the ground, they'll kind of explode and create some splash damage, which might be kind of interesting, actually, for some other like just standard enemies, too. Like, maybe you'll see some of those guys before you get to the Tra Tabout boss fight. so that you're like, oh, okay, I've run into these before. Now she's got like a whole like brace of them on her back, and she's throwing spears at me. I wonder if one of those is going to be explodey spears that I've been dodging for the rest of the stage. So there are little things that I'm going back now and being like, okay, maybe this needs this and this needs this. So yeah, AOE spear explodies. What game couldn't benefit from that? But anyway, yeah, having her mounted, like I've kind of run a test with that, and it's so much better and so much more interesting than just starting them off separate and having two things that come at you at once. And this is a much nicer, more logical start to the boss fight, both visually and mechanically. I feel. That's the idea. Again, like this whole podcast thing is almost might be kind of a funny way to look back on what my thought process was, after the game releases and stuff, and how wrong or how right I was about certain things. I don't know if I'm necessarily gonna go back and listen to it, because even when I'm editing this, like I don't really edit it at all. I just kind of put stuff at the beginning, like the intro, and then I put stuff at the outro. I don't ever actually listen to it. I'll make sure that it plays from start to finish without having any weird, digital glitchy shit in it. But for the most part, I can't stand listening to myself. So lucky you three people who are hearing this. But anyway, man, off track again. Sorry for sniffling and some of the sounds you're hearing is like me rubbing my nose and shit, because allergies. We've established this already. Anyway, moving along. So yeah, lack of platformer-friendly hazards and projectiles and things the game sorely needs. So I've been sketching out some things for newer, more pattern-heavy enemies, because I've got plenty of enemies that are adaptable to the environment, and they have a lot of different attack sets and stuff, and they kind of navigate the area and try to fight you in different ways and interesting different ways and things, and which showcases the game's melee combat system. What I don't have a lot of is stuff that aids in the game being a 2D platformer, like I said before. So I've been going back and doing some spear traps, which are coming along nicely, and you can see me start to work on those in the last archived live stream that I put up on the YouTube channel. There's basic little spears that will pop out of the ground or the wall. I need some arrow traps too, and all this stuff is very easy because most of it I already have assets for. Like I have an arrow asset, and I can recolor it if I need to, and I got plenty of spears. Different spears and stuff that I can use for different areas and things like that. Speaking of all this, though, one of my more interesting enemies I feel like that I have is the wall crawler guy, the guy that crawls on ceilings and walls and stuff, and he'll spit acid at you. I kind of want to do a few more different sort of versions of him, maybe versions that jump, and give you a nice sort of jumpy pattern. Just like I need more flying enemies too. I need enemies that sort of communicate a more like sort of sine wave pattern, and maybe that don't necessarily bump into solid objects. Maybe annoying fucking bastards like the Medusa heads from Castlevania is essentially what I'm talking about. Maybe unfortunately, I don't know. I'll have to see if it works well. But yeah, I just need more platformy stuff, man. Like, the game is more than covered on interesting fighty, combat-y type guys. So we're getting there, man. Like Trot's About is coming along great. I'm very happy with her. In spite of, it seems like every time I hit a boss, I almost hit like a development wall. I can feel that that's where I kind of start to burn out a little bit because the boss is so complicated usually. But she's the second to last one, so we're getting there, guys. We're getting there. I know, especially if you're listening to this, which has got to be a very small percentage of the percentage of people who are waiting on the game. You got to be wondering where the hell the game is by now, and I am too, man. Like I feel just as much of of the pressure to finish it as, you know, maybe the squirminess to want to actually play the thing. And I'd be bummed that it's not out too if I were waiting on this game. Kind of like I was waiting on Dark Souls 3 when it didn't come out, but yet still released in Japan, and that whole release thing was a clusterfuck for that game. But anyway, yeah. Work it as fast as I can. Sometimes not as fast, like when all the allergies are attacking, but, you know. Anyway, we're getting there. Tratabout is the second to last boss that really needs to get done. The big main boss, you know, the big event sort of boss that needs to get done. Still need to do a lot of area and level design, and communicate, you know, the sort of story through all that stuff too. Like, those are really interesting avenues to communicate a story in now, I feel like. And you can do it with clutter, you know. You can do it with interesting things like, you know, oh hey, here's a patch of bodies in this corner over here, along with like some maybe bits and pieces of armor. So maybe there was like a battle here or something, or maybe there's a big giant monster that killed these things, and maybe you're going to run into them. You know, telegraphing through prop placement, I am finding to be actually a really rewarding kind of experience when I'm going about my level design. You know, like maybe I mean, there have been a lot of areas that I'm working through, especially like in a cave type setting, since I've been focusing a lot on the Ilgogi area. Is like designing the gradual lead up to maybe a dwelling. So like maybe outside you'll see like broken pieces of ceramic stuff, you know, like clay pots and shit, you know, or something. Or like little trophies and things, and then you get into the actual settlement, and it's like, oh, here's where all the stuff is. This is where they actually live and like cook their man meat and stuff, things like that. Or maybe this is where they bury their dead, and you know, without actually like running into a sign or something that says, you know, Ilgogi Cemetery or Ilgogi Bedroom. This is the Ilgogi bathroom. You know. Trying to communicate all that shit visually, you know, show me, don't tell me, essentially, is a good rule of thumb that I'm finding to design my levels by and my stages by. So yeah, there's all that stuff. Sketching out some more interesting platformer friendly or platformer appropriate enemies. Speaking of sketching, sometimes I feel like. I rarely sketch, like when I'm doing enemy designs and stuff. Usually it's like right off the cuff, directly into graphic scale, which is where I do my sprite work in. So most of the time there's very little concepting or actual design work going on. It's like, okay, the enemy is the enemy, and I'm just going to do it. And I see it in my head, and that's what's going to come out on the thing. But for Tratabout, she... I did do a little bit of sketching ahead of time with her, just to kind of get a good attack set down, because I felt like I needed to. For some reason, I guess it just depends on, maybe it depends on what I had for breakfast. Who knows? But I feel like sometimes I need to do fake concept sketches. And what I mean by that is like if you ever need to show like oh, here's some concept work that I did after the actual thing was done. Because I'm thinking about like when the game is done, within the Kickstarter rewards, I did promise a digital art book. And what I realized is like a lot of the stuff that existed in sort of like pre-planning and any amount of concept stuff was, some of it, not all of it, some of it was lost in the fire. So I'm like, am I just going to have to fake concept sketch some stuff to accommodate an art book? It'll be the Book of Lies. I don't know. Yeah, I can do plenty of like art just for fun, like character sketches and stuff after the fact, which is fine too. I don't see how that's like any less valid. It was just kind of a funny concept that I was thinking of. Was like thinking about different art books and stuff. Like, you know, for example, like a Witcher book. You see a lot of concept art in those, like area concepts and weapon concepts and character concepts before they actually go into modeling the guys and, you know, texturing them and rigging them and all that shit. For me, sometimes it's the opposite, where I'm like, I already did the shitty little pixel art version of this guy. Maybe I'll draw a picture of him now to show that, I don't know, to pretend that I conceptualized him at some point. And this was a concept too that I had heard Scott Kurtz. He's a cartoonist. I had heard him talk about on a podcast. I feel like that was a couple years ago. Anyway, random thoughts. Maybe that that little weird instance of thought diarrhea will take the place of any questions and answers, because I haven't really been asked any questions. Nobody's really asked me anything, or at least nothing that I could remember. And not in a very direct way either, where it's like, hey, I listened to your podcast. Here's a question that I would like to hear answered on the next episode. So if anybody listening to this, if you've made it this far, if you have any questions or things that you think are interesting to discuss, I'd be happy to take a stab at it on the next episode. If not, that's totally cool too. Just relax and just relax. I don't know. Have a milk. Have a glass of warm milk and I don't know. Yeah, get a blanket, some pillows. Yeah, just chill out or something. So yeah, no questions and answers. And that is kind of where I'm gonna wrap it up, I guess. On the on the blanket, warm milk, pillow monologues. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for listening. You are awesome. Make sure to add the game to your wish list on the Steam page. The game in question is called Savage, the Shard of Gosen. If you like any of the music that you're hearing in the intro or the outro, go check out the music page at planettobor.com/music, where you can download all the free stuff and all the chunky old music that I've done over the years. Again, thanks for listening, and have a great day.
No big.